Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us this morning. This is, in case you are in the wrong spot, this is a panel, a workshop about intentional disruptions to the internet. And it's a workshop format. So we'll start out with quick remarks from the plenary, from our panelists here, and then we'll break up into two workshops. After that, we'll reconvene and talk about the lessons that we've learned. So we've seen Access Now, the organization I work for, we've recorded more than 50 intentional disruptions to the internet by governments around the world. We actually believe that the number is far higher than that. That's an extremely conservative estimate. And we've seen that human rights violations and internet shutdowns go hand in hand, meaning that when governments order and disrupt the internet, which can include social media applications, people are shrouded in darkness. They're unable to communicate with their friends. They can't talk to family. Emergency services are disrupted. And as you'll hear, there's also a severe economic impact. Some of our panelists here, we're very lucky to have people from various stakeholders. We have people from government, from companies, from civil society. We have people in the room who've been directly impacted by internet shutdowns. So we hope that that will make for a fertile conversation during our workshops. Just want to start out explaining a few great things that have happened this year. One is that there was a Human Rights Council resolution that unequivocally condemned internet shutdowns. We had a great statement by the Global Network Initiative that you'll hear from shortly. And there was an important statement by the GSM Association. We've also had progress in other areas. At Access Now, we're involved and spearhead the Keep It On campaign, which has more than 100 organizations from nearly 50 countries. Many of those countries are impacted by shutdowns. And this year, we've also joined with in a creative partnership with the company called Lush, a cosmetics company, to raise awareness about shutdowns. We launched a campaign with a very special bath product that launched in 40 countries, 6 languages, and nearly 1,000 stores around the world to tell people about internet shutdowns. We also invited people to take action to show that this is a practice that needs to stop. And you're looking at it right here. This is the action. This is 1,000 pages of signatures from people who are committed around the world to turning the internet, keeping the internet on. So we're going to deliver this message later today. So I'll turn now to, and after this, just after we have these brief introductory remarks, we'll have another discussion. So we'll open it up for questions before going to the breakout group, just in case you have any burning questions. So we'll turn now to Judith Lichtenberg from the Global Network Initiative to speak about the work of GNI and their priorities.
Thank you, DJ. It's a great action. I want to start with by saying about this, your coordinated action with Lash. My nieces really love the bath bombs. I didn't know what it was until they told me actually that they really like it, and now I'm happy to give it to them, and they are real activists for network shutdowns. So that's a good start of their young life. The Global Network Initiative has identified network shutdowns as one of its priority issues. We have been concerned with government-ordered shutdowns already for a long time, since the complete shutdown of the internet in Egypt in 2011. But what was then almost an unprecedented step has now become all too frequent. We know that national laws allow governments to take control of communications during a national emergency, and we also acknowledge that the protection of national security and public safety are legitimate government concerns. But having said that, network shutdowns and disruptions are very drastic measures, and they often risk to be disproportionate in their impact. So they can not only have serious consequences for the freedom of expression, but also for a whole range of other economic and social rights and economic development. And DJ gave already a couple of examples of that. The good news is that awareness has grown. Diverse voices have spoken up against network shutdowns. But I think an important question now is what are the next steps to prevent and mitigate network shutdowns? It's a question for all of us. And in any case, it is a problem that cannot be solved by companies, governments, or civil society alone. It really requires a sustained multi-stakeholder collaboration. And I want to conclude with two comments. First of all, we believe that it is critical that all stakeholders, including governments, not see network shutdowns only through a security lens, but also through a human rights and economic development lens. And that requires education of and also engagement with governments and their agencies. And secondly, in terms of engagement, it's very good to keep in mind that the window for engagement is before network shutdowns are issued. Telecommunication companies operating on the ground in challenging jurisdictions and in the middle of a crisis will have very limited options to respond at the moment their local staff is confronted with a government order. So this discussion is very timely indeed, and we look forward to the results of the breakout sessions. Thank you, and I now give the floor to Gigi.
Thank you very much. My name is Gigi Alford. I work at the United States Department of State in the Bureau for Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor. So thank you for the remarks before. I think this is obviously a very important panel and great panelists to talk about this. As many of you know, the United States has been speaking out increasingly about our concerns and taking steps to condemn measures by state actors to intentionally prevent or disrupt access to or dissemination of information online in violation of international human rights law. So essentially, this is what government-backed disruption of mobile and internet networks does. This is something that is articulated in the US strategy for cyberspace that was issued in 2011. Which is, speaks in support of an internet that's global, open, secure, and reliable. And living in fear that the internet will be shut down or that mobile services will be blocked disrupts that trust in the internet. So I think I've been asked to speak specifically, along with a colleague here, about the increasing trend of disruptions of internet and mobile services around elections. And this is, I think, one sort of case study that needs to be analyzed because it looks at the motivations of governments behind doing this. And so when we speak about the economic argument for keeping the internet on, when we talk about the human rights argument for keeping it on, analyzing how to work with governments ahead of potentially planned shutdown along these issues, requires a little bit of getting into the psychology of wanting to stay in power, wanting to make sure an election is peaceful, because these are concerns that we know are often behind some of these sensitive times, and so something that just can't be treated in the abstract. It's important to understand these tendencies. Elections and protests are times that we've seen it. We know that this violates international human rights obligations and can run counter to human rights commitments. So reminding governments of those commitments is definitely a first step. Making sure that they understand that these types of restrictions are not provided for by law, and that they're not the least restrictive measure for achieving what, in some cases might be legitimate government interests, such as the protection of national security. So making sure that you're coming to the table with alternative viewpoints of what can be done to try to address these times of transition and political sensitivity. Because unless there are other options on the table, that extreme measure tends to be what governments will go to. So just to give a little sense of where the U.S. has been engaging on these issues over the past 6 months to a year, we were really pleased to join consensus on the Human Rights Council resolution in June of 2016, which unequivocally condemned these intentional measures to disrupt free flow of information. This is also something that we're engaging with the Freedom Online Coalition to speak jointly with other governments on these issues. The more and more the trend grows, the more it becomes normalized. That's something that the Human Rights Council resolution statement tried to do, was to push the norm back towards the assumption that once the internet is turned on in a country, that it will stay on. And making the human rights legal case for that, and kind of adding to the voices that are making the economic argument, which is important, but kind of part of this bigger picture. In addition to co-sponsoring that, this was something that in October, the Freedom Online Coalition conference spoke to quite frequently. There were panels to discuss this, and a decision by all 30 members of the FOC to issue a joint statement speaking on network shutdowns. Now, what will the joint statement say in addition to what's already been said in the Human Rights Council resolution? This is something that we're hoping to work closely with private industry, with civil society, with academia to understand what can be said beyond that normative statement, how to take it to a new level of political commitments and operationalization. So there's been support from our Assistant Secretary for Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor, Tom Malinowski. He wrote a blog post speaking to some of the concerns the U.S. has about the trend and calling on governments to make commitments not to engage in these measures. And happy to say that there were examples of good news to report. So at the end of the blog post, our Assistant Secretary did mention the example of Ghana, and so I'm happy to turn the microphone over to Kenneth Adu Amanfo, who's the Deputy Director for ICT in the Ghanaian National Communications Agency, to speak a little bit about the experience there. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Elizabeth. Yes, I think in this era where almost everything that we do, it's kind of, hello, I'm sure you can hear me now, yeah. In this era, that almost everything that we do on earth is gradually migrating to the internet. I mean, we cannot afford to have the internet shut down. Let me just talk about the experience in Ghana. Couple of months ago, the police chief issued an order that the internet was going to, or the network was going to be shut down during the elections because of, incidences that have happened in other countries. And the whole public, came up, the media, the telco operators, everybody came up and, so the government, the president didn't have an option. The president, not an option, but the president came up to issue a communique that the network was not going to be shut down during the elections. Fortunately for us in Ghana, the president happens to be a former minister of communications. He also happened to be the first board chairman of the telecom regulator. So he understands technology and he appreciates it. So he came up and issued a communique just to assure the citizens of Ghana that the network was not going to be shut down during the elections. After that, still the civil society groups were still coming up. People were still not, even though the president has issued a statement, people were still in a little bit doubt. But last week, about 2 weeks ago, we organized our Cyber Week, which was part of our the U.S. government security government's initiative program that is being implemented. And as part of awareness creation, we organized a Cyber Security Week where the whole public was there. And the Minister of Communication reassured the general public at a forum that the internet was not going to be shut down before, after, during, and after. And the Director General or the head of the telecom regulator also did same, reassure the general public that the internet was not going to be shut down. Subsequent to that, the telecom regulator organized a press forum with the media to, reassure them that, hey, the internet is not going to be shut down during the elections and afterwards. And then we also organized another workshop with the telecom and then the ISP, telecom operators and the ISPs, to also assure them that it wasn't going to be shut down and all that. So fortunately for us, today is election day, and my time is almost getting to about 4 o'clock p.m., and the network has not been shut down. So far, the elections has been peaceful, and people are going around voting and everything, and it's not been shut down. So I think we are. Having said that, I think when it comes to internet shutdown, it's not only about during elections. When we look at the social and the community, I'm sure when we break out into the group, those discussions are going to take place. Looking about people over the top, the OTT, services, where by the operators, it's kind of a disincentive to the operators, because I work with the regulator. I know that there was a time that the mobile operators, made a proposal, gave a proposal to the regulator that, hey, people are now making all calls, using the WhatsApp and the Vibe and all that, and it's affecting our revenue, because the voice calls are dropping down and our revenue is dropping down. And if that is happening, then it means government tax is also dropping down. So it's something that has been a proposal that has been forwarded to the regulator, that a discussion is, currently going on. So it's not about just the elections, but also looking at the social and then the economic aspect. So, but I'm sure that during the breakout we are going to have a lot of discussions. So I don't want to, jump to conclusions right now. Thank you.
Hi, so I'm Andy O'Connell from Facebook. First of all, thank you for organizing this. This is obviously an incredibly important issue for a lot of people, standing room only, and it's certainly an incredibly important issue for Facebook. I'm not going to repeat any of the content that's been discussed already, but I would agree with almost everything that's been said. From our perspective, this is an incredibly troubling issue, and the trend is in the wrong direction. In 2015, it's sometimes hard to assess, and we'll talk about that. We think we were blocked by governments about 15 times, and so far in 2016, it's been more than 40 times. So the trajectory is in the wrong direction, and governments do appear to be getting more sophisticated and more aggressive at blocking the internet for a number of reasons, including elections. The thing I've been asked to focus on is two things. One, the economic piece, and two, the measurement piece. And I'll be very brief. I think that, echoing Judith's sentiment about the importance of multi-stakeholderism, there's an important role for the private sector, civil society, academics, governments in establishing mechanisms to monitor and track when blocks happen. There is not such a resource right now that's publicly available where it's easy for a large number of people to understand exactly what's going on in real time. And we think that's an important thing that the multi-stakeholder community needs to step up on. And I think that will be an issue that we dig into in the workshops. The second piece I'll talk about is the economic piece. Our company's mission is to make the world more open and connected, and it's really anchored in letting people share or connect with friends and family. And so for us, the human rights arguments, the social arguments are very persuasive, but we have found that there are certain stakeholders who are much more likely to be persuaded by economic arguments. And so we do think, again, the multi-stakeholder community needs to spend more time on that. We've seen good progress on that front this fall. There have been two, I think, pretty important studies on the consequences of blocking that came out in the last couple months that I'll just mention very briefly, and I suggest all of you take a look at them. The first one is a Brookings Institution study that came out in October, and the headline of that is essentially that in the year that they looked at, which was part of 2015 and part of 2016, there were 81 blocks that they tracked globally pursuant to government orders, and the estimated economic damage was $2.4 billion. So a huge amount of economic impact, and they were very clear that they were only able to look at pieces of this, and that the actual impact is probably much higher. The second study was a study that we supported and worked with GNI to release, I guess just last month, I think. That was a study that was conducted by Deloitte. And again, I'm not going to get into all the details, but the headline was they structured a number of scenarios for government-ordered blocks, and under the most extreme scenario, a block costs 1.9% of global GDP if it's government-initiated. And then there's a lot of other scenarios, and they track the mechanisms through which the economic damage happens. Again, I commend both of those studies to you, and I sort of call on the community, and I'm excited that we're going to have the workshop to really dig into these two issues, because both on measurement of when blocks happen, why, how, and understanding the consequences, the economic and social consequences, there's a lot more work that needs to be done. We've got a decent foundation, but I'm counting on all of us to work together over the next half hour, 45 minutes to figure out what the next stage of that work should be. So, thank you.
Thank you, Andy. We're going to open it up to questions. Just want to mention, first of all, those studies are fantastic and really important contribution to this challenge. The other thing is there are 3 victories within the past week. One of them is that Chad, which had a long-term disruption, lifted those restrictions. Ethiopia has also lifted many, if not all, of its restrictions on social media. And Gambia did shut down the internet last week, but before the order was supposed to carry out from Thursday, election day, or the night before election day, through Saturday, international pressure, groups, members of Keep It On, and various stakeholders really pressured those governments to stop their disruptions. And in Gambia, if you look at it, it was a small country of 2 million. I do think that the shutdown brought a lot of attention. If most of the headlines around that election said something about an internet shutdown. So our feedback from local partners in Chad, Ethiopia, and Gambia is that international pressure makes a difference, and it can come from other stakeholders. So these were not just random events. They weren't arbitrary decisions. Your contributions from whatever community you're a part of make a huge difference in protecting lives and economies. So with that, I don't see a place to receive the WebEx questions. So Andreas is, from International Media Support is moderating those, and maybe we can coordinate there. But we'd like to open up to 2 to 3 questions, then we'll go to the breakout groups. So. And please let us know which panelist you're addressing. Thanks.
I just have a technical question about the scope of the term internet shutdown. I see that just turning off the switch that connects to all types of all URLs will obviously be an internet shutdown. But is blocking of certain social media sites, is that also considered part of the, within the scope? I'm asking this because the Korean government, through Korean Communication Standard Commission, routinely blocks various platform sites. For instance, ForShare.com, which is a peer-to-peer file sharing website, that has been blocked, although it has faithfully abided by notice and takedown under the MCA for copyright violation. I mean, for assisting copyright violation, of course. And also North Korea and North Korea Technology.com, which is a media site that provides information on use of technology in North Korea, also has been shut down by South Korean government for national security reasons. I don't know why. And you know that all North Korean government sites are inaccessible are inaccessible from within Korea. So access to those sites are also blocked. Is that also within the scope of the term internet shutdowns? Or?
I can answer that question. We kicked off the Keep It On campaign by gathering stakeholders to create a definition. I can read it now because there's a transcript. It goes, an internet shutdown is an intentional disruption of internet or electronic communications, rendering them inaccessible or effectively unusable, so that takes into account throttling, for a specific population or within a location, often to exert control over the flow of information. That's a very technical definition. Duration is missing from the definition, and also two-way communications tools, because we think that's an important part of it. So we're looking to refine that definition at our coming conference, Access Now's conference called RightsCon. We welcome you. We welcome your input. We think it could be better and stronger and more effective. The examples that you gave, the longer-term, persistent disruptions to the internet at the moment wouldn't quite fit the definition, but we can re-examine that together, and we invite anyone to participate in that.
Good morning. Thank you for your presentations. I have a question in terms of scope. So when talking about full shutdowns, I mean the control of the elements of the TCP/IP protocol and stopping the connection between the sender and the receiver. A personal account of mine is that since 2005, there were at least 21 shutdowns. I mean, I know for the applications, this is a lot higher. So, but I believe there is a mistake believing that this is a type of policy considered only for authoritarian regimes to silence the political rivals in times of disruption, in times of elections. This is a policy that has been in the eyes of the well-established democracies for a while. Now, they have different reasons for what they say they do it. The most classical reason is always on the basis of the national security, the attack on the critical infrastructure, or the attack on the vital elements that preserve the nation state alive. Do you have any insights into this? Like, I heard sometimes too some representatives talking about a cyber Pearl Harbor. But so they talk about this, but they don't know exactly how they are going to implement it and when they are going to do it. Okay, thank you.
Sorry, did you say a cyber Pearl Harbor? Oh. Does someone want to speak to this? Well, I can speak to the, we do know that there are many causes for shutdowns. So the 21 number that you mentioned, governments are disrupting the internet for school exams when 6th graders sit down to take exams because they believe they're cheating and sharing answers. University students, there are all kinds of reasons, and the public order, around elections is and national security is, they're cited frequently, but we do know that there are several different causes. About the cyber Pearl Harbor, that's something that I think we're going to be exploring. It does seem that disruption by one government of another government's internet can impact this discussion, but at the moment that's not the focus of we're talking about internal disruptions within state borders rather than cross-border attacks. So I think that's a slightly different discussion, but one that will impact this community soon. So, yep.
I think one thing we've noticed since 2011, when there was a very high-profile internet shutdown in Egypt that grabbed headlines across the world, that a number of governments are looking for ways to do this in practice without detection. And it looks like that there are a range of attempts to figure out how to achieve the purpose of this disruption without inflaming, public outrage and pushback or international pushback. So, I think this is something that is important in the definitional, conversation. We do need to know what we're talking about when we talk about it so that the conversation can be productive and move forward. But that's why I think it was wise for the Human Rights Council resolution to use the phrase measures by state actors to intentionally prevent or disrupt access to or dissemination of information online. For that context, that made sense. You're invoking a right and trying to make sure that there's an awareness and application because this same resolution establishes that the same rights that apply offline apply online, and this is clarifying what that means when it comes to access to internet and information online. Likewise, for the cyberspace strategy that I spoke about earlier, the descriptions are that people must have confidence that data will travel to its destination without disruption, assuring the free flow of information, the security and privacy of data, and the integrity of interconnected networks themselves are all essential to American and global economic prosperity, security, and the promotion of universal rights. So again, this was passed in 2011, and there is an increasing number of tools in the toolbox of controlling information online. If you look at the Freedom on the Net report for 2016, they document 9 types of internet controls that governments use to censor and restrict information flows and commerce. One of those is localized or nationwide shutdowns of information and communication technologies, and it's happening in 15 of 65 countries around the world. The same countries that are using this, one of the 7 of the 9 types of internet controls, it's sort of a grab bag, right? And they're going to use the ones that fit their purpose and often, avoid the negative backlashes that we know are there. And I think that's part of the reason why the multi-stakeholder approach is so important. And I really echo what Andy and Judith said to that effect.
Thank you, Gigi. So I think we will now break. We have a lot of expertise in the room. We'll break into the workout groups, the breakout groups. So we'll have no exercise. We're not going to force exercise on you. So on my right, your left, we'll have the economic impact, and we invite everyone along this table to just turn your chair around. And on this side will be the elections. Because of change, unfortunately, the technical measurements one, which is an important part of the conversation, our panelist was unable to participate today. So we'll focus on economic impacts and elections. So everyone on this row, please just turn your chair around. Everyone on this row, turn your chair around. And for 40 minutes, we're going to discuss these questions. We do have a goal within each group. So just to shape the conversation a little bit, we'll have a moderator. So Andy will moderate the economic impact. I will moderate the elections conversation. So just to ground the discussion, so we're not starting, we're going to start by looking for one point of progress, so something that has been accomplished within either the economic impact or the elections, 1 to 2 challenges that need to be addressed, and then 1 or 2 next steps or solutions, just to ground things a little bit. So we'll reconvene at about 12. We'll aim for 12 to 12:05. Thanks.
Just Martin Levy from Cloudflare. You mentioned that you were missing an expert on measurements. I just want to say that there are a few people in the room that have that expertise, and if people want to find us, we should put our hands up now. Higher, Colin.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we can create one more breakout group.
Well, I don't want to break your breakup groups. I'm just saying if people want to find us individually, have a chat, then there are.
Would you or Colin be willing to moderate that? Yeah. Well,
Yes.
okay. So why don't you come to this back corner here? Anyone who wants to talk about technical considerations can come to this corner back here. Yep. Sure. Yep. Yep. Thank you.
Javi.
Got it. Okay, so I think the premise now. So I think the premise for this group is that it is the case that network shutdowns are economically disruptive and damaging, and that there's more work to be done to document and describe that to help make the case as a community that we should see fewer shutdowns and that we should reinforce the norm against internet shutdowns. But I wanted to say that and see if people wanted to react to that and maybe
elaborate on that or disagree with it?
So I'd fully agree with that, and I really welcome the 2 reports that have come out this year. I think they've taken us a long way in. So can we turn off the speaker? You'll have it in a minute. So I'm going to whisper into the microphone. It makes everyone come in closer to hear what you say. That's probably better, actually, isn't it? But I think we've still got what we've been able to do now is quantify the immediate cost of shutdowns. But actually, I think the real cost is those secondary effects. So, for example, Ethiopia, the immediate cost of the economic shutdowns actually doesn't look that big because the online economy there isn't massive. But think about how many companies aren't investing in Ethiopia because of the fact those networks aren't there. So the question is, how do we take what we have now and actually really quantify what the real economic cost is of the missed opportunities? And the argument I put out here is, I think about this in the way we think about climate change. So the day that governments really stood up and started listening to climate change is when we put an economic cost on it. If you don't take action now, this is what's going to cost you. If we can do the same for internet shutdowns, we might make some progress, because while the rights-based approach is something we need to work on, and the work we're doing for the Human Rights Council is 100% correct, but actually certain governments are never going to listen to that. It's the economic bottom line that people really listen to, but we're not articulating that well enough.
Well, I just wanted to highlight some of, for example, relating to the blocking of WhatsApp in Brazil, some of the costs that we have. First is, of course, we got the cost of implementing the network shutdowns, that's the operational cost. Then we have the cost of customers calling our calling center because they get very upset and they think that their service is not working properly. So that's a significant cost because, as for example, in WhatsApp penetration in Brazil is very high, and we had lots of customers that were very upset, and we had, the volume of incoming calls to our call centers was massive. And then third, we have the lost revenue that, of course, as we cannot do the traffic to the WhatsApp, there's a lot of revenue loss on that side. And then there's, of course, the cost of reputational cost. This is reputational cost. It's difficult to implement, but at the end, customers and the population have the impression that it's the ISPs, the telecoms, that are the one effectively blocking, and we are responsible for that. So that's also a cost to be considered as well.
So I really agree that the economic argument is key for us to have this discussion. But adding what's your name? Sorry, said, I believe that we are in the beginning of this process of measure this economic cost. I really want to hear about what is your impressions about this Brookings study and the other study you mentioned? Because when we are talking about an entire shutdown in a country, I think it's more monolithic, the way you measure it and all that stuff. But when you block or a part of it, when you block an app or when you block social media as a whole, it's different. It's different when you block one and you block the other. And having this data is crucial for us, for everyone, to discuss with government or to discuss with institutions that are doing these measures. Because they're sensitive to economic arguments, but they want to hear how do you got this data? And this is important. This was measured with a formula. The formula is this one. We believe that the GDP is impacted because of this and because of that. And I think we in the beginning of the conversation of what kind of methodology we should have to measure this. Because I know that we have costs. Then the companies have costs. The commercial users, for example, have a number of costs. But I really want to hear your impressions of where we are on this discussion. In the beginning, we have a good methodology for that or not?
I just have 2 points. just on that, I think, it's very useful now that we have some economic studies that we've, been able to put out, which have mostly taken, I think, very conservative methodological approaches to saying this is how much we sort of know, but we know there's all these other things that we can't measure yet. And so step one, I think, is having, bringing that economic discussion to a internet governance, crowd. But step two is maybe we need to get folks at economists talking about this amongst themselves, and then they can start to hash out some of those issues. So we need to bring this to, international economic gatherings and forums. The other point, which I'm going to relay secondhand from colleagues who held an event with investors in London, I think it was last week or the week before, I think the top line number from the Brookings study was $2.4 billion, the cost of shutdowns. And an investor made a comment to my colleague saying, well, that's actually, from my investor perspective, that's not very much. So it doesn't actually matter that much. And, but there is actually, I think, a bright side to that is because we know that, it's where digital economies are less developed that it's easier for governments to use this tool. And that there does, I think, you can get to a tipping point where if the digital economy is so developed, and then we know that that's the sort of upper end range in the Deloitte study that G&I released, where these are very expensive costs, that then governments are going to be less likely, except, of course, when it comes to issues of real sort of regime survival. And we know that in those cases are where the economic argument may be hard to make. But there's a lot of room to, if we can connect this to, the more that countries become connected, then it's a harder decision for a government to make to shut down networks.
I don't want to put you on the spot. You already spoke.
Just very quickly, so on those figures, 2.4 billion is 0.00001% of the global economy. It's nothing, right? And when I saw the G&I report, I thought, this is great, we've got some more stuff. And actually, I was trying to use it for some of the briefings I was producing to actually go and talk to governments. And then I realized, actually, no, that's still 0.001% of their GDP, right? And so we haven't got yet figures that are going to make people stand up. But it's really great that we've got this platform though, and so I totally agree with you. It's about how can we get economists and people who can really think about this. And I think the challenge goes then to also civil society in these countries, because it's only people who are on the ground in individual countries who are really going to know what the costs are and what isn't happening as a result of shutdowns.
I would like to highlight that it's not just putting pressure on governments for them not to order the shutdowns, but it's also how we can collaborate, how we can, all the businesses and all civil society and the governments collaborate for those reasons not to happen, for the governments to order the shutdown. So it's not just asking them, you cannot do this. We have also to find ways for the reasons that they are claiming that they are forcing the internet shutdowns not to happen. So it's also a need for all of us to collaborate and try to prevent those events happening.
So one other challenge I've heard is that the two big studies that exist are an American study and a British study, and that we need to think about getting more studies localized, done by local organizations, with a real a deep dive on Brazil or a deep dive on Uganda. Does that resonate with folks? Does that seem like a good way to think about it?
Maybe the proportion or the relation you should do, it's a tiny part of the world's economy, but maybe it's a huge part of that country's economy. And to say that, well, if you shut down the internet in a country or if you block an app in that country, it could have a huge impact on this economy specifically. Because we know that the world's economy is concentrated in some countries, and they're not doing this, or they're not doing this on this way. So maybe doing these comparisons can help to us understand the impact impact on population, impact on different countries. You know.
Anyone who hasn't spoken want to?
Hi, thank you. I just want to share, I'm actually working on the Freedom Online Coalition's joint statement on internet shutdowns. So we're taking a lot of input from civil society, businesses, academia, and also other governments. One of the interesting things that we discovered is that when you talk about $2.4 billion of the global economy, you're exactly right. It's a drop in the bucket. It's insignificant. But when you take a country like Ethiopia, which has a per capita GDP of like just under $600 per person, and you shut down the internet, one of the big sources of hard currency, foreign currency, is the Ethiopian national airline. And to run an airline like Ethiopian Airlines, you need internet connectivity to connect your hub to all your outlying stations. So the Ethiopian government attempted to tailor how the shutdown worked, but it still impacted their operations. So $2.4 billion on a global scale, you put that, you now spread that out to the countries where it's actually happening. I think the number that we used was $700,000 a day concentrated in Ethiopia. Again, that's a relatively small number, but in a country that is trying to develop, that relies heavily on connected industries for foreign currency, it actually does have an impact. We saw another shutdown a little bit earlier in the fall in Gabon, where the government actually, knowing that there were going to be economic impacts, attempted to tailor the shutdown so that the shutdown was only from 6 p.m. until 7 a.m. So people could presumably go to work, they could use the internet, and then they'd go home and they wouldn't be able to talk about the election. But again, those types of shutdowns don't work because Gabon has an oil industry, and the oil industry operates 24/7, and it requires being connected to Paris, to Amsterdam, to Houston. So there ended up being economic impacts. So we should really think about it as a localized issue, and that these countries that rely on foreign currency are really shutting their access to the global economy in many ways by doing this.
Hello, you have the microphone for 15 minutes.
Oh, okay. Hello.
Live on YouTube.
So it's not for us.
Oh, okay, so you won't hear it. Okay, okay. Yes.
We have 10 minutes. Okay, so we've been talking about victories, challenges, and solutions regarding elections. We came up with one major victory, which was the example of Ghana. They decided not to shut down the internet and today are having peaceful elections, so it's a huge victory. And on top of that, the president was the former ECOWAS chair, so his influence goes a long way in the region, and hopefully this can be an example to other countries. We talked about what helped to achieve this, and some of the things were that the president has a good awareness of ICT issues, there was pressure from civil society and companies, and they publicly announced the decision to not shut down the internet, which allowed for additional advocacy in support of that decision. Another victory that we talked about were guidelines that were developed in Australia regarding blocking and what the process must include. So we talked about that sort of as a solution, but I put it down in the victories as well because I think it is a victory. And it's something that we can look to. We'll talk about it again in solutions. For challenges, I have down that decision makers may not understand ICT issues. Laws in some countries allow for shutdowns, such as the elections law in Brazil. And other countries have national security laws that they look to support their decision to block or shut down the internet. And countries may not have laws that are strong on human rights. For solutions, we talked about creating a one-pager with some of the arguments against shutdowns, like the economic impacts, and citing joint statements against shutting down the internet, developing a best practices document. We talked about leverage being more successful beforehand, and again, the example of the guidelines in Australia, looking at how we can borrow or apply those in different contexts to shutdowns and blocking, potentially as a model, and then pushing for better laws and for laws on human rights in various countries. Was there anything that I missed that you guys mentioned? No? Okay, I think this is a really good list. Is there anything that anyone wants to add?
we could add that maybe the Freedom Online Coalition member states which have a commitment in its collaboration could look into the Australian example to find inspiration on a next step on work against network shutdowns.
That's really helpful, and this is a period of time where we're working on a joint statement on intentional shutdowns and disruptions of internet and mobile services, and definitely looking to take it from just talking about norms and commitments to something much more practical and implementable. And it sounds like these guidelines are a great starting point for that. So thank you, and Kenneth and my colleague Justin are actually co-drafting the first initial pass of that statement, and want to work closely with civil society and industry in devising that statement. And it should be multi-stakeholder, it should be collaborative. So find Kenneth and find Justin here, or we'll give you our cards and you can reach out for that. I can say that one of the main expectations with this statement is it becomes something that FOC countries can use to mobilize when there is either a threat or an instance of a network shutdown. There is an existing statement from FOC from 2011 on disruptions of social media, and it does talk about a mandatory blocking being an extreme measure that is subject to international human rights law. And this was something that, as you know, many of the examples of instances over the past year of disruptions that have happened in social media particularly, the FOC countries have been able to take that statement, share it with embassies on the ground, and say, you know, please reach out to your colleagues in the local government and make sure that they know that there is this joint statement from 30 governments committed to promoting and protecting human rights online that says this is not an acceptable approach to trying to control the internet. It's an extreme measure that isn't justified in these cases. So the hope is that the new joint statement will be useful in alongside the existing statement, but in a wider range of examples of these threats. I believe it's called, so it's a 2011 joint statement on blocking social media, and I can pull it up, but if you go to freedomonlinecoalition.com, you will find it under documents. It's one of the joint statements from several years ago.
Anyone else? Don't be shy now that we have the microphone. Any other victories?
Well, I think what we can draw upon from this Internet Governance Forum here in Mexico these days is that there is this full support for a multi-stakeholder Internet Governance Forum, but it has been taken even a step further so that we are inspired by the talks at the opening session yesterday to build multi-stakeholder initiatives, not only the IGF, but other initiatives. Such as the work that the Industry Dialogue and GNI is doing, where GNI is a multi-stakeholder initiative. So let's find in the areas of internet shutdowns and human rights in general, multi-stakeholder initiatives that we can build further on, because it seems the way to go to build leverage. Thanks.
Maybe, Colin, correct me if I'm wrong, sometimes a challenge that can be faced, and we see a lot in Latin America, is that sometimes there's a technical failure that governments are taking advantage of by blocking the internet. For example, let me put an example. In elections, there's a mass crowd, there's a lot of people in one place, so there's no internet connection, there's no internet access, so there's a disruption that is not coming from the government, it's a technical failure. But because it's a technical failure, the government is not acknowledging that it's intentional, and they are taking advantage of the situation. So they are almost free-riding the situation and saying, oh, there's a technical failure, it's not an intentional disruption, but they are actually blocking the internet, blocking freedom of expression, freedom of access. So sometimes it's not easy to see and to spot an intentional disruption, and there's a problem in order to find a solution to it.
I just want to kind of piggyback off of that. One of the challenges from the company side is determining or being able to identify when there is a shutdown or a block. And part of why that's hard is that often these are for short periods of time, like a few hours. And there's usually a huge uptick in internet traffic after the shutdown ends. So if you're looking at average traffic over the course of a day or however you're measuring, it can be really hard to see that there was a dip and then a huge uptick because it averages out over time. So it can be really hard to identify.
Yes, so I'm with the telco operator, Telia company, and to the extent blockings and network shutdowns are through requests to the operator, and the situation comes about, which you explained. Many times the government will tell the operator to not inform the customer that it's a shutdown. So what the company then can do is still to push back. So not to it's confidential to tell the truth that it's a blocking by the authorities. But what the company can do is to say to the users that this is due to circumstances outside of our control, and the users will understand that it's not a technical problem. So by using that connotation, the company will not break the law because it's confidential, but at least we make known anyhow to the users why the network doesn't work.
Yeah, and I can maybe add to that, is that the Global Network Initiative has developed a set of principles and implementation guidelines that inform responsible decision making when companies are faced with requests from governments that could impact freedom of expression and privacy rights of their users. And so those implementation guidelines and principles are public documents, and they could also be followed by other companies everywhere in the world, and they help them to fill in their obligation to respect human rights from their perspective.
I think so. One of the other best stories that we've from my country is that we usually take the period of the campaign. Like so when there are elections, we usually engage government officials, the MPs, and the ministers, and actually even the voters themselves in what we call the voter civic education. And we actually advocate for issues like the citizen journalism to report incidences during the election. And so during this period, we make it a point known to the government officials that it's very important that the internet should be used for the good of the rule of law during the election, and people should report things that are happening within their areas. So I think if it can be dealt with prior to the actual elections, not because I think what has been happening is people responding to what has happened after the elections, like the internet shutdown. But if we can deal with it from the during the campaign period and the whole voter civic education period.
So to do advocacy like in the run-up to the election, is that your suggestion? Yeah, got it. Okay. I think we only have a few minutes left. Any last thoughts?
I have a question actually. Can anyone say anything about the impact of international election observation missions? They also tend actually to investigate media landscape, and so I was wondering whether I was wondering what the impact is of international election observation missions. They tend to also investigate media landscape and whether there is enough space for all candidates to have campaigns. And so I was just wondering whether that is also a channel actually to get more awareness and monitoring of this typical network shutdown and disruption tool that is used before elections?
But I think in our case in Africa it's different, because every time you get the international election observers, and then when they're compiling their report, even though you've seen the irregularities within the election, they would still say the elections were fair, and but I think it's a problem. I don't know where it can be tackled from, but I think they are on the ground irregularities, and in terms of, I don't know whether it was also reported during your, they said it was fair, and but then they had, yes, everything is there,
Nationally, first of all, the Electoral Commission will say that it was a completely fair election. Then the international observer, their comment will be very shy, actually. It was quite depressing this year. So I don't see how we can, I think it's civil society organization actually that can mostly monitor those irregularities.
So I could add one thing. If we're looking for tools, as Judith called for tools that can be used beforehand, rather than the hour when the request is received, of course we have the general tools which are the UN guiding principles, and then we have the policies and guidelines for our industry from the GNI and from the industry dialogue. We have the company policies. What Telia Company has provided on our homepage is a tool for assessing a specific request. So assessing to find what could be the pushback measures, how could be the way to interpret a request as having a minimum impact on freedom of expression and privacy. So that tool is available on teliacompany.com. And you will find it on sustainability, freedom of expression. And it is stated there that if there are any comments from anyone in the room or of those that are listening online now, please let us know so that we can elaborate the tool and also share it with peer companies. Thanks.
Great. Did you want to?
I have just a quick observation. It's not about elections, but at least in Brazil, we face the additional challenge that some telecom companies see, for example, WhatsApp or messaging services as a competitor. So when they receive blocking orders against WhatsApp, they actually see that as an opportunity. And so it's really difficult for us to imagine that they would challenge these orders in any sense. Just an observation. And I just wanted to say that these cases that I mentioned about WhatsApp and Facebook and many others are on a platform that we gathered. We gathered case materials. It's here, bloqueios.info, and all the case materials were translated into English. So if you are working on any studies or about app blocking or shutdowns, and you are interested in Brazilian cases, that might be a good resource.
Great. Any last comments? Anyone want to give an example of an internet shutdown that they've personally experienced, just to give some color to the conversation? Huh?
Well, for Uganda, the case was during the election in February 2016. So the context in Uganda is that the president is in the power since 30 years old. So he changed, of course, the constitution a few times as to allow number of terms to be multiplied. This time he had, I think he was afraid to lose this campaign, and I think they know that social media is a powerful tool, and they are good at identifying what could leave them out of the power. So I think for him it was obvious to shut down internet and social media during the campaign. Of course, it's not the only measure that happened. I mean, the opposition party leader was in jail during the whole election process. Of course, a lot of irregularities were noticed during the whole process. But I think the internet shutdown showed his determination. It was really concrete to the world that he did not want this election to be fair. And it's maybe also something to explore how to publicize those disruption so that international pressure can also help in those events, I would say.
Yeah, I didn't actually personally experience the WhatsApp blockings because I was studying the US, but I would see my friends going crazy, starting to use Telegram and other messaging apps, and suddenly I would receive requests from all these other apps. Yeah.
Thank you, Katie, for sharing.
You're welcome. Thank you, everyone, for your contributions. I think we have a great list here. Thanks.
Differences which are a challenge.
Yes.
And actual people on the ground.
Okay, so that's an aspect of this. Is there anything else that we should mention if we?
Society could play a really significant role in being the intermediary to get to the people on the ground. So instead of having to.
But we are going to be reconvening to wrap up in a few minutes. So if we could get things. So is this the guts of the song that you want to go back to the microphone with?
Yeah, we're wrapping.
Who's going to do the rap? Congratulations, Colin.
I'll do the rap.
Years of management have made me delegate with gusto.
Wait, does wrapping it up mean that I speak into this camera?
Colin, sometimes you have to do that.
Like currently, or are we?
No, I think we're meant to be reconvening.
Okay.
That's how I read it. get started with the wrap-up. It's okay. It's we could please sit down and get started. We have just a few minutes to do the wrap-up, and I know that we've already lost quite a few people to some competing events that are going on right now. So thanks. I'm David Sullivan from the Global Network Initiative, so we're just going to quickly have a report back from our breakout groups, which we've been pleased to, yeah. Is that better? No. Okay. So thanks everyone for also helping us to pioneer the breakout group format here at the IGF. Very curious to get feedback on how that went. I know our space was not optimal, but I think at least from the economic group that I participated in, I think we had some really useful discussions, some useful chances for people to get to meet one another and start to strategize on how we can adopt a multi-stakeholder approach to these issues. So I believe that Deji had to run to deliver his petition. I'm going to, just based on some very helpful notes provided, summarize the discussion in the elections group and then perhaps turn it over to others who were part of that group who can elaborate. For the victory in elections, we can clearly point to Ghana, and we were very delighted to have the representative from the Ghanaian government here today. The role of the president is someone with a lot of influence both in the country and in the region, and that's something that we can hopefully will play out in a positive direction in the coming months as other countries go through their electoral cycles. Challenges. I see that decision makers may not yet understand ICT issues, and that the laws in some countries allow for shutdowns or allow national security laws to enable shutdowns. And then finally, we have technical failures that governments can take advantage of for political purposes. Finally, in terms of solutions, I see push for better laws, including laws on human rights. We need to be able to marshal the economic impacts arguments and joint statements in order to engage with governments and to develop best practices that we can share with each other. I'm going to stop at that. I see a lot more victories, challenges, and solutions that this group has developed, but I'm going to first perhaps check and see whether Judith or Katie has anything from that group that they would want to add to or subtract from my attempt to summarize it.
I think that was a good summary. I felt very inspired in the group. I think we had one obvious victory to point to with Ghana today, but we had a lot of smaller victories that pointed to more attention coming to this issue very formally. And there was a lot of talk about kind of taking those and looking at other ways to push, like I don't know if you mentioned the Australia example, but Australia developed a set of principles for blocking, and the thought was that that could be taken and applied in other contexts. It could also be a potential model on shutdowns, and that the FOC could look to it when they're developing their joint statement. So there was a lot of creative thinking on how we can take what's happening now and some of the smaller victories and turn those into larger victories. So it was a good discussion. Thanks.
Great. Should we move then to the economic group? And Andy, pass the mic.
So yeah, we had, I think, a really good discussion. I'll try to go quickly because I know we're losing people's attention. But I think on the challenges side, I think the biggest challenge was the lack of a comprehensive, reliable data set. To get more robust economic analysis is going to require more robust data, time series data, lots of details, lots of coding. I think another big challenge that we identified is the diversity of the ways that governments disrupt access to data and access to information. So you have everything on the sort of technical side, from like deep PI blocking to throttling, but you also have sort of policy measures like extremely excessive taxation on mobile data, which some people in our group thought might be seen as a type of blocking. There's also a tension between having a very conservative, defensible methodology for an economic study that excludes a lot of things that you know are important but are harder to definitively measure. There's a tension between that desire and the desire to have a practical impact on the behavior of stakeholders. There's also a challenge of needing to localize a lot of this information. Sort of the studies that exist are sort of at a global level, typically done in the global north. We feel like a lot of people in our group felt like there was a need to do this at a more localized level with local anecdotes, local data, local cultural context. In terms of solutions, we're really looking forward to what the measurement group has to say. Our number one solution was getting a much better data set, and we thought that that would require sort of a multi-stakeholder measurement apparatus. And so I'm excited to turn over to them in one moment. The second thing was getting studies that look at the longer term economic issues. Sort of the existing studies are more about the like abrupt impact of a shutdown, but a lot of people in our group felt like there were longer term, potentially much more damaging consequences in terms of consumer confidence, investor confidence, the education decisions that people make, the business decisions, deciding whether or not to start a startup in an environment where shutdowns happen. But none of the existing studies seem to capture that because it's hard. But we think that there's a lot of room for that. And then the last two things are, we think we need to do more to put this issue on the agenda in regional and local and national fora, as opposed to, it's currently mostly at the global level that these conversations happen. We think we can all do a little bit better job putting it, submitting proposals for local events. And then the other thing was doing more to get international financial institutions to look at this issue, like the World Bank, the IMF. A lot of people in our group thought that that could potentially be impactful in terms of generating interest. Actually, sorry, I skipped one. The last one is moving this conversation out of just sort of the internet governance, internet rights space and into more traditional economists conversations. So figuring out how to get this on the agenda at, I don't know if these organizations exist, but like the International Association of Economists, making this not about internet issues directly, but a broader issue of interest to economists so they can do more serious work in addition to the great work that's already been done. I think that captures it. I don't know if anybody else in the group wanted to throw something. Okay, I'll stop there.
All right, I think ours can be succinct as well. As far as successful case studies, I would look forward to look to the blog posts that were put up by Cloudflare, and I think Siphon has also published on certain incidents. I think that these are really good examples of characterizing the political and economic impacts and also demonstrating that there's a potential for accountability, that these things can be monitored. Yeah. Okay. As far as difficulties, I thought that there was also a really excellent counterexample that showed how much of these technical measurements are informed by sort of our political biases or our expectations, which is, for example, when Telstra goes down and takes out the entirety of Australia, do we think that that is a politically motivated or economically motivated shutdown? Why do we think that that's the case? And also demonstrated how crucial, in certain respects, external assistance, whether it be active measurements from other data sources or whether it be sort of country expertise, whether you find through personal relationships or based off of social media, how much that sort of demonstrates this. This is kind of goes back to a classic joke RFC that there's no evil bit on the internet. There's no real like political intent shutdown indicator. And then getting back to the moving forward, what was unique, at least for me, about this panel was that a lot of the data sources were sort of passive measurements from service providers. Those are entities that aren't often in the room in the academic settings where we talk about active measurements from purpose-built tools. And I think that this highlights that there's an opportunity for commercial providers, with respect to confidentiality, to inform the process and inform our understanding, complemented by the public data sources, the public tools, whether it be Measurement Lab, which I work with, or RIPE Atlas or other, UNI, for example. And so it's not just that we, this is truly a multi-stakeholder process in order to gather really rigorous and comprehensive data. Oh, I also missed that it's often and difficult to determine shutdowns in smaller countries where there are regional shutdowns, or whether there's an inconsistent methodology in the shutdown across different service providers. But I think that that also speaks to the value of making sure that there's a feedback cycle between civil society who might have a better understanding based off of having people on the ground and sort of either the people that are responding to it from a service provider perspective, or whether it be like a accountability and public interest movement. I think that's all I have.
That is terrific. Thank you, Colin, and all of your colleagues for taking that technical conversation forward. We're going to take this conversation forward in a number of respects. Particularly, there is another workshop on this topic, I believe on Friday morning. So I encourage everyone to go to that and to keep the conversation going. We'll be doing that, looking ahead to things like RightsCon and other international gatherings in the future. So on behalf of GNI, Access Now, and International Media Support, thank you, everyone. I think this was really valuable, and we look forward to continuing the conversation.